Steve Schlueter. I'm going to be your guide today as we kind of navigate what are the conversations that we've got to be having with people today in this crazy kind of wackadoo real estate market that we find ourselves in. In fact, we're going to look at what are the key messages right now that are going to help move people maybe off the fence that aren't sure what to do in this environment. And before we get started, just a little bit about Steve. I'm a veteran of 37 years of the real estate industry. Started this business at the age of 23 in a market that was in an extreme shift. I started my real estate career in Austin, Texas, and you've probably heard Gary Keller talk about the market having gone from 5,000 agents to 1,800 agents in a window of time that was about 15 months. And that's when I decided to get in real estate. So I'm the one that kept it going to down another one. I decided to get in, and it was the best gift I ever got. So what we're going to really talk about today is it's kind of the gift of shift. It's the opportunity to really dial in the conversations, the MOFIRs, going back just a little bit of history on Steve. Spent 11 years in a sales career that culminated with being one of the top 20 RE/MAX agents in the state of Texas, then being courted by Gary Keller to be a team leader in his Austin Northwest Market Center. So I spent 4.5 years working with Gary at the Austin Northwest Market Center. Our market center was ranked number 4 in the country in transaction side. So productivity is my game. Today, I operate a couple of market centers in the Austin area. I'm a bold coach. I'm part of the Keller University Master Faculty, and of course have the group program called Never Ending Referrals. And you'll find out a little bit more about that today as well. And if you'd like to join us to learn how to have more of these conversations, we'd love to be at your side in doing that. And so let's get started this morning. And hey, Joe, thanks for being out there. And I'm curious, I would love for some of y'all to come off mute. And I've got a question. You can throw it in the chat. You can come off mute. When you talk to people today about real estate, if you were to ask them the question, your people in your database, people not in the industry, and you ask them the question, what have you heard about the real estate market? What are their answers? Or what do you hypothesize they would say if you ask somebody today who's not in our industry, what have you heard about the real estate market? What have they heard?
People say that there's a correction due, that prices are overinflated, but they don't realize that if we had had a normal market over the past many years, we would be exactly where we are. So it's a matter of educating them.
You got it, Karen. Dead on. All right. What else have you hearing? Low to no inventory, says Ben. It's competitive. Now, first thing they say is interest rates are too high and home prices are too high. And Annie, interest rates, Mary, doom and gloom. They're on the doom and gloom mode. Okay. Wow.
They think it's great or it's awful.
It's said again.
They think it's either great or that it's awful.
Isn't that interesting? I mean, it's the same situation in completely different perspectives. Sylvia, interest rates too high. Why buy during election or after? And so I don't know if that's a statement or a question they're asking, or wait. Okay, gotcha. And man, we've got all those answers today. And let's get started today. I'm going to pull up some slides. Andrea, waiting for prices to come down. Now, by the way, here's the thing. What we're going to talk about today probably applies to most of your markets. Here's what we do know, that real estate is local. It's not national. And so what you're going to have to do today is take some of what I'm going to introduce you to, and you're going to have to localize it. You're going to have to bring the local perspective. And what my intention to do today is to create a framework for the messages that you can engage your database, potential would-be clients, confused public with, that helps them make a decision to get off the fence, or if they're considering real estate, doing anything in real estate at all, or to at least be educated and know that the decision they're making is an educated one, and what the benefits or consequences of deciding or not deciding might be right now. Now, I'm going to frame this with something Gary Keller said at the beginning of the shift. And like I said, I've been through at least 5 or 6 significant shifting markets in a 37-year real estate career. So I absolutely have seen it all. I understand what it feels like going through it, what happens, and what's going to come out on the other end. Now, we don't know whether the other end's 6 months away or 16 or 26 months away. And yet we know that there's real estate runs in cycles. And I'm going to suggest that anything that's the negative is going to be very short-lived. And we'll talk about why here in just a little bit. So let me pull up some slides, and I'm going to introduce you to some perspective here. Okay, stand by. It looks like I need to pull that slide up. Just a moment. I apologize. Dun, dun, dun. I had it open on the wrong machine here, so let me pull this back up. So can we pretty much agree that the consumer is rather confused? And the consumer is massively confused about what the market is, what the industries has going on, what to do, what not to do. It is certainly, I call it a crazy wackadoo real estate market. And, they are certainly in need of a guide. Okay, I've got this slide set up. Let me go back to screen share. So as we dive into this conversation about getting buyers and sellers off the fence through the conversations and the MOFIRs that we have, one of the things that Gary Keller shared with me, he said, well, in fact, he shared it with a group of us as coaches, and he said, it's the agent with the right messages. Now, y'all, I want you to write this down because this has to become a battle cry in your world. It's the agent with the right messages that match today's market, combined with the right MOFIR or MOFIRs that's going to win the market. Now, MOFIRs, MOFIR, it stands for making offer for immediate response. So we have to put out a message that is commensurate with what their feelings or thoughts or opportunities of the market might be that catches their interest. And then we have to make an offer to invite them to engage with us. And today, what you're going to find is that level of engagement is really us simply getting to the kitchen table. Get to their kitchen table or get them into our office to a conference room where we can have a conversation about their needs, what it is they want to accomplish, and then educate them to see if now might be the right appropriate time. So that said, let me go ahead and pull up the slide again. And as we dive into this, I want to start here. And I start off every session like this with this slide, because this is how you win in a relationship-based business. And we know more than ever with do not call and anti-spam laws and all the things that we deal with, that it's more important than ever that we build the foundation of our business on a database and on relationships, versus transactional where we're chasing. And so in building a relationship-based business, it's important that we build a foundation of trust. And this thing called the trust triangle, it comes from the Harvard Business Review. And they did a study on business leaders and how they developed trust with the people they led. What was it that led to a trusted relationship? And when I heard this, I said, this is exactly how you and I build trust in our relationship with the people in our database, our sphere of influence, our past clients. And so the 3 points of the trust triangle are, number one, logic. And the logic part is they have to know that you know your business, that you know the market, that your reasoning and judgment are sound, and that they can follow their reasoning, your reasoning, that what you communicate to them, they're going, oh, I hadn't thought about that way. And that makes complete sense. And then on the empathy side, it's them understanding that you care about them, their needs, what it is they decide to accomplish, their well-being. It's not about making a sale. fact, write this down. And Gary said this back when we were in the pandemic, and it's still true today. And it's particularly true today. Service first, sales second. And that's the empathy piece. How do I create connection, value, empathy, knowing that they feel cared for? And then authenticity is understanding that every single person, is equipped with a BS detector, believability scale, by the way. And because if we're not being authentic, it gets smoked out. The relationship feels weird. It doesn't feel authentic. In fact, this piece, we dedicate a whole session in Never Ending Referrals to this, because it's one of the biggest challenges. It's why so many agents don't call their database. They feel like the conversations are inauthentic. And maybe you're like me, you're high assertive, and the idea that I'm supposed to be everybody's best friend is weird. And that's not real. It would be fake. And yet everybody can become the trusted advisor and hold that space of advisor and do it in your natural, authentic self, so that you're believable, you're connectable, and people relate to you. And when we do this, we deliver the logic, the empathy, and the authenticity. Then we have this foundation of trust where people call us, they listen to us, and they ask us around the needs and around their needs of real estate. So with that said, we've got to develop trust. And I want to start with the empathy conversation. And we talked about what are those conversations and MOFIRs right now. And I'm going to, in advance, tell you guys I'm fighting a little allergy. So I'm going to have to take a sip of water break here and there. I might mute myself. So bear with me. And so let's go to this from Susan Scott. And Susan Scott said, the conversation is the relationship. I want you to write that down. The conversation is the relationship. So if we're going to be in a relationship with people, we've got to have a conversation. And I want us to explore a little model for having that conversation around, what we're starting with today is the empathy side. And we're going to start with something called the care call. And you've all heard that concept of calling and just checking in on them, caring, see how they are. And I want to give you a framework for how we do this. And so let me write down the framework. And so we make the call, and we let them know that, hey, thanks for taking my call. And I had a quick real estate update for you. There's a lot of crazy things going on in our real estate industry and market, and wanted to give you a little update. And so I'm telling them that there's going to be a business component to the call. So make sure that your framework starts with, it's acknowledging, thanks for taking the call, and then it's setting the tone for the purpose of the call. I've got a business update or real estate update. And then the next step is we're going to engage them with a forward question. Now, if you're not familiar with forward, it's family, occupation, recreation, or dreams. And maybe I did a little social media stalking before I, dove into my calls this week. I went through my list of calls. I did a little social media stalking. I saw they just took a trip to Disney World. And so before I get, and I would say, hey, so before I get into that though, I saw that you guys just took a trip to Disney. Tell me, how was the experience? And I'm going to let them talk. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to ask an appropriate follow-up question. So I asked a forward question, an appropriate follow-up question. And then based upon that, I listen carefully, might make a comment, acknowledgement, and then I'm going to transition. Now, the next step is I'm going to transition into the business portion of the call. So as I said, and then I'm going to, so as I mentioned, I wanted to give you a little real estate update today. So let me tell you why I called. I'm getting a lot of calls from our clients and friends and who are really asking about what is going on in the real estate market. When are interest rates going to come down? Is the market going to crash? There just seems to be a lot of confusion in this crazy wackadoo real estate market we're in right now. And I just wanted to be available to kind of just maybe share with you any perspective that you might have or questions you might have. And just curious, what have you heard about the market, about the real estate market? Now, that's a vital question. Now, I asked you all that at the beginning. and all of your answers were all over the place in terms of what you hear. And yet that's the question before you get into statements, you want to ask this question: what are you hearing about the real estate market? Now, this is going to give you an opportunity to do one of two things. I want you to write this down. You're going to have the opportunity to either educate or validate. Again, educate or validate. So if their perception of the market is not in alignment with what you believe to be accurate, then you have the opportunity to educate. If their understanding of the market is fairly accurate, you have the opportunity to validate. So validate might sound like this. The person says, yeah, my economic advisor, was telling me that probably interest rates are going to stay, higher for quite a while. And, at least that's what I'm hearing. And I'm going, well, I think your advisor's doing a good job advising you, because that's probably really accurate. In fact, we believe that to be highly accurate based upon our research. And of course, the reason being is we don't, we're seeing, generationally, the millennial come in such a peak spending period in their life that the pressure on inflation is likely going to stay sticky for a while, and thus interest rates higher. And so I think you've got that dialed right in. And so, I'll tell you the reason I ask is we're finding that because the market is, as I say, kind of wacky right now, there are some unique opportunities for people that might be willing to get in the market today. And I'm just curious, do you guys have any real estate plans maybe dialed in over the next 12 or 24 months that y'all been considering? And so after I've either validated or educated, and the educated isn't going to be a deep education, I'm going to go to my offer. My offer in this case is beginning with, do you have any plans to do anything in the next 12 to 24 months potentially in real estate? Has anything been on your radar? If the right situations were there. And then let's say they say, nah, we're super happy where we are. So that's awesome. Well, the reason I ask is I'm offering a no obligation strategy session for anybody that might be thinking about it, because there are some super opportunities right now in this market. There's a little breathing room for buyers. We don't have all the competition that we had, although it's still a great seller's market. So thanks for that. And if I can answer any questions for you or anybody else, just let me know. Hey, before I let you go, tell me what's the next big trip on the radar for the family? And now what I'm doing is I'm transitioning out of the conversation. I'm closing with a forward question: family, occupation, recreation, dreams. Yeah. An occupation question might sound like, hey, before I let you go, tell me how are things at the World of Work? How are things at Dell Computer? I'll just ask a generic question, whatever they say. I ask an appropriate follow-up question, and then I wrap up the call with, hey, it was great to catch up with you. Tell you what, I'm going to stay in touch a little bit more frequently right now, if that's okay, just because it's a very fluid time out there and the opportunities are kind of unique. So I'll keep you guys informed of what's going on. Meanwhile, is there anything I can do for you? And then I wrap up the call. Now that call can occur in 6 minutes. And the beauty of that framework, it's very conversational. And if you follow that framework, they're going to feel with that empathy piece is going to hit. I also hit slightly on the logic and the business conversation. Now, if she had said that, well, I'm hearing that interest rates are likely to come down here in this next year because of election year, then I'm going to take the opportunity to educate. I've been hearing that a lot, and I think that's something that's kind of an old myth, that election year that interest rates always go down or tend to go down. And here's what our research is telling us, and it's telling us that there's so much pressure on inflation, and that the Federal Reserve and the government is more scared of high inflation than they are higher mortgage rates and interest rates, that actually right now, in fact, the Fed's latest announcement, even though they didn't raise rates, they did say in their announcement that rates were going to stay higher for longer. and that they're really intent on tapping down this inflation. So as much as that's something we hear out there too, nothing really points to that, regrettably. And I'm concerned that we're probably going to be in a high interest rate environment for a while. And yet there's some great opportunities in our market. And I'd love to, again, then I go into my offer. Just curious, had y'all been playing with the idea of anything next 12 to 24 months, with regard to real estate? And if they said, well, we were thinking if rates went down. And I said, well, I might say, well, you may not realize this in certain circumstances right now, we've got sellers offering concession and we can get you a sub 6% interest rate today. Sounds like maybe we ought to maybe schedule a strategy session. Would you be up for that? So you see how it plays out. I'm going to either educate or validate. I'm going to inject my offer, which is the business consultation or the strategy session. And then I'm, of course, close with forward and we have a nice dialogue. So let me pause there for a minute. Any thoughts or questions about that framework or the care call? All right, we're moving on. If you got it, just chime in. You can.
I had a quick question for you, Stephen.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm like newer to this world. And so my question kind of is like, let's say that you've done your due diligence, you've gotten your, your talking points, so to speak, and then they bring up something that maybe you hadn't studied or wasn't on your radar. Like, do you have suggestions for how you can redirect that or speak to that?
Yeah, thank you for asking. And here's what we'll do. In fact, I'm going to we'll talk interest rates in a second, for example. I think there's a great opportunity to build around that, because if people have these different beliefs, because let's do an experiment real quick. In the chat, I want you either to put a P for positive, and listen carefully before you enter. A P for pessimist, an O for optimist. And pessimist means you're pessimistic about interest rates getting anywhere below 6% in the next 2 years. Optimist, you're pretty optimistic within the next 15, 18 months, we'll be back below 6%. You're an optimist. O or P? O for optimist, P for pessimist in the chat.
Meanwhile, I have a question.
Go ahead.
I have a number of contacts in my database that maybe I've neglected to stay in touch with. And what is a nice way to reintroduce, just say, hey, I'm still a realtor. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's the, oh, heck, I haven't talked to you in forever call, right? It's the and many times it just simply starts. And I guarantee you, everyone here on this screen has those people. And some of us more than others, and that's okay, because here's the first thing I want you to hear about people you're not in flow with. The people you're not in flow with, they're not sitting around there going, when is that darn Schlueter going to call? And they're not thinking about you. Trust me, they're busy with kids and life and stuff. They're not thinking about you. And that's the big problem. They're not thinking about you. So when they're ready to do something real estate, they've forgotten about you. And so the thing that we do is I just pick up the phone and I go, hi, how do you pronounce your name?
Karen.
Karen. Okay. So Karen, so Karen, and, I would come and I would say, hey, Karen, hey, it's Steve Schlueter, a long lost soul. I haven't talked to you in forever. And, I was thinking about you this week, and I've been checking in with all my peeps. There's just so much going on in this crazy wackadoo real estate market. And I just want to kind of touch base, see how you are, and give you a little update on things that are going on. It's been so long since we chatted. What is new in your world? What's going on with the family? What's going on with work? And then just go right into forward. And then, so let me tell you a little bit about that market update I asked about. First, what are you hearing about the market? And I would just go right into the same conversation. And then, of course, you'll leave and you'll be in flow with this person now. And trust me, 97% of the time, they're delighted to hear from you. And so the 3% they're not, the operative 4-letter word is next.
Exactly. Thank you. That's helpful.
You got it. All right. So, so here was the interesting thing. When I asked y'all to put O and P in the chat, it was split. And so knowing that that's an informed group, and we're not going to get into it now. And typically in a classroom, what I would ask somebody to do who's an optimist, I would say, well, then make your case. You know, show me the evidence. Make the case that, is it just a feeling or is it a certainty? Because here's what I'm going to leave you with, and you know, this thought around this, and I'm going to let me pull the slide back up. Yeah, we're going to come back to that. Okay. The first thing I would say is, I didn't have the right slide queued up. Yeah, here it is. Okay, sorry. Is you got to decide who you are. Either you're the optimist and you're this guy, and you're really clear about interest rates are going to come way down and you've got something to back it up, or you're this guy who's the pessimist and you're certain and you've got something to back it up. Just don't be this person in the middle. Somebody said, well, what's interest rates do? Go, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. That's not going to give anybody any certainty to do anything. And so our job as real estate agents is, you know, if we're going to be trusted advisors and economists, we have to absolutely have certainty. And so I'm going to share with you what that might look like. I will tell you that I am an interest rate pessimist, and it's based upon really doing the work and having so much certainty. Now, by the way, if I miss it and we go into a deep recession and interest rates come way down, well, first of all, recession stinks. Number one. Number two, if they come way down, there's the refinance opportunity. Is there pressure where they could continue to go up? Yes. And I would hate for somebody to miss the opportunity of right now. So let's go into some slides. And whatever it is, whatever certainty you get, it's important that you be certain, because as we dive into this, the consumer needs a guide. And, you know, when I look at what's going on in our industry today, home sales annually are projected to be 4.3 million this year, down from our peak of 6.1. So we're back at 2009 Great Recession levels in terms of the number of units of home sales. Now, what that means is we're going to see a massive dip in the number of real estate agents that we have in this business, because there's not enough transactions to support the agent count that we have today. And to give you some perspective on this, is if we look at where we were in 2008, when transactions dropped really low, you know, it was 6.9 units available per sides per agent.
Actually, states and know the obvious.
Yeah,
My
if somebody will mute, please, Megan, if you can, yeah. Shortly after that, over the course of the next several years, National Association of Realtors shed 330,000 agents. And of course, what happened towards the end of that era, those that survived thrived, because transactions available per agent came back up to that kind of baseline of 10 as an average, just short of that to 9.8. And then 580,000 agents, when the market's good again, flood into the industry, and they start to drop the transactions available per side, per agent. And yet, here's what we know. People don't think this is going to happen. It's very likely going to happen. And it's the agent with the right messages, the right guide, getting them more kitchen tables, that's going to win the day, not the agent who's waiting. And so with that said, let's jump into this whole thing about interest rates. Now, one of the things that you've got to do to be the trusted advisors is make use of clippings that are out there, headlines. So as we look at some of the headlines, this was the Fed decided not to raise rates, warns of higher for longer. So have your evidence. And here was another article on the same issue, pauses rate hikes for second time this year, but hints at another increase. And then in the same article, it says additional increases before the end of the year and indicate that rates are likely to remain at peak levels longer than previously expected. And then he goes on, we're prepared to raise rates further if appropriate. Now this is a big line. We intend to hold policy at a restrictive level until we're confident that inflation is moving down substantially toward our objective. Bottom little hyperlink here, Fed skips an interest rate hike, but high mortgage rates could be here to stay. One of the measures that the core inflation was up higher than expected was part of the issue. And then another issue, and we're going to talk about why this is part of the driving factors around interest rates, was that unemployment came in at 3.8, jobless rate lower than their estimated 4.1. And now they're anticipating this next year that will be 4.1%, lower than the 4.5 that they had predicted. Now, all this matters because when people are employed, what do, folks? They spend money. And when they spend money, that's what fuels inflation. Here was another recent article, inflation steps back on the gas. This was in the last couple of days regarding, fuel prices. And fuel prices impact everything. The truck drivers putting diesel in their rig, who's taking groceries across the country or anything else that we consume, and we're consuming a lot these days, this is going to add to the core inflation over time if this doesn't get tamed. If we go further, no relief in sight. Mortgage rates hit highest level since 2000. Dave Ramsey explains house buying in 2023 and why this is the time. Go find people out there that were influencers and what do they say about the market? And, essentially he says, if you can find a house, regardless of interest rate, I want you to go ahead and buy now. If you're out of debt and you have an emergency fund in place, he has said. He continued, just refinance and dump the old mortgage that you had at 6 or 7% when it lands right now, wherever it lands right now. And so essentially, here's Dave Ramsey, financial guru, saying, buy it today. Here's another article. What if mortgage interest rates stay high? What do the experts say you should do? Well, buy now, refinance later. It's find the things that will support your theory and yet be aware of the things out there that might support a different theory. One of the things that we did is developed a consulting guide for our agents to help them have the conversation about all these things with the consumer. And in 4 slides, they can completely address the interest rate issue. And so one of the things we would do is we want to get somebody to that consultative conversation where we sit down and we have an opportunity to talk about, the strategy session. What is it they might want to do in the next 12 or 24 months? Can I educate you? And if they had concerns about interest rates, can I educate you on where we believe interest rates are headed and why? And a little history around that. Would that be okay? And in just a few moments, I can walk them through these 4 slides. And in fact, I'll just take these individually. And the first one, this comes right from Keller Williams research. And if you go to mykw.kw.com, if you're with Keller Williams, and go to education tab, these are the Mega Camp market update slides. You can pull all these for yourself. Take a screenshot here if you like. And said, can I give you a little history on interest rates? And said, well, you notice that we have, since the Great Recession in 2008 and 9, we've been substantially below the 30, 32, 33-year trend, which was closer to 6%. So actually where we're averaging so far 2023, just a little below 7 and currently above 7. And yet when we look at interest rates prior to 2008 and the Great Recession, rates were really not above 6 much to speak of. There was a brief period following a recession regarding the dot-com bubble where they came just below 6%. And yet what we've had here has been unprecedented over time. And, we're often asked, of course, well, what happened when they came down? It was because of the Great Recession. The Great Recession ebbed in 2012. And the question I often get asked is, why didn't they come back up? And that's a really good question. It's because there was low pressure on inflation. And there was low pressure on inflation because the baby boomers, which was this huge population bubble, was now out of their peak spending years, which is about age 48 to 52. And the millennials had not yet entered their peak spending years, which again, 48 to 52, and yet family formation years in the 30s and early 40s are also escalated spending. And so now we have a consumer that's a bigger part of the spending base today, not to mention the supply chain issues that we had initially. But yeah, if we go back to 1973, I just want to make, give us a historical perspective. This was a high inflation period in the early 70s through the 80s. Inflation was sticky for many years. And I want you to imagine, now, by the way, the longer term rate over time of 50 years is just below 8%. And if we look at this person in 1973, when rates went above 8%, if they would have said at that time, I'm going to wait till rates get back down to 8, they would have waited till 1993. Let that one sit in for a second. They would have waited 21 years. And yet the long-term appreciation trend of real estate during that time was 4%. And think of what they would have missed out on because they didn't get in the market. And by the way, they missed out on all the high interest rates by taking action, then if they took action versus now. I really don't want to get at 16% mortgage rates in the market, or 15 or 13. My first mortgage was 13.5%. So have lived it and been through it. So the next piece of this is I asked them the question, so your favorite burger place, barbecue place, Chick-fil-A, you've probably seen help wanted signs in front of every one of them. Is that right? And they'll say, yeah. I said, what is the dollars per hour changed like that they were offering over the last few years? I know that the Chick-fil-A near my house, it was 2 years ago, it was $12, $13 an hour. Now they're offering $17, $18 an hour and a whole mess of benefits. And all that's driven by a couple of factors. The fact that we've got extremely low employment, essentially full employment. Everybody that wants to work is working. And when you look at the last time we saw 3.6% unemployment, when was it? And it was last year. Other than that, we haven't seen that, not in the last 33 years. And then the other thing you keep hearing about is you're hearing strikes, you're hearing wage increases. The Teamsters, the UPS driver, that guy has now $162,000 pay package and benefits and salary through their negotiations. Airline pilots, professionals, union workers, auto workers, everybody's negotiating pay increases, and wage growth is going to continue to be an issue that's also going to fuel inflation. And here's why. You have 9.58 million job openings, and you have less than 6 million people looking for work. And so our population of, a lot of the baby boomers coming out of the workforce and having not being replaced because there was a smaller generation behind them has become a significant issue in wage growth. And all of this is going to do nothing but likely fuel inflation. And so I can make that case in 6 or 7 minutes. And so this is why we believe that interest rates are going to stay sticky and remain high for a while. We don't know how long. And it's also, guys, it's also possibly the reason we may have a soft landing and not a real deep recession, because we have a consumer that's working, salaries are starting to catch up with inflation. We have a demographic as such that the consumer is coming into their peak spending years in the millennial generation, in their family formation years right now. So everything points to inflation is likely to be sticky. And Mr. and Ms. potential buyer, if inflation is going to be sticky, interest rates are likely going to stay elevated, would be our understanding. Any questions on that before I get, or thoughts? Lucy, thanks. Got it. Yeah.
So sorry, just the only positive thing to say is that they can refinance. Just the interest rates aren't going to change. So,
Oh, well,
like if you had, go
sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead, Brian.
I just don't. Aside from the people that are moving because they have to, a necessity, there's not really a way to put a positive spin on the interest rates, right?
No, there's a great way to put the positive spin on the interest rates, and I'll show you why in just a minute. Because depending on your market, this goes to your message and your MOFIR. So understanding this, we just have to know, and I don't want to give anybody false expectations if when I absolutely believe, because here's the deal: if all this pressure, if wage growth is there, if there's not enough people to fill jobs, are wages likely to continue to go up? Possibly. Is it possible that we're not done seeing interest rates go up? Could getting 7.2 today be a lot better than 8.5 tomorrow? And so I'm going to get into some of those specifics on those MOFIRs in just a minute. Yeah. And so this is the case. Now I'm going to show you some, as we'll get into some market stats. Let me go back to share my screen. And I know this is a lot of technical stuff, and yet this is the level of, and where this came from, guys, is Gary Keller. In fact, I'm going to be doing even more in depth on some of this on our never-ending referral session today at noon. Every quarter we do a market of the moment conversations and update, and we're going to go deeper into some of these so that we have this firm understanding of what the opportunity is. And if we had to explain it in depth, we could, and we are clear and we believe it. You don't have to believe anything I say. I'm just giving it my best educated analysis. And Gary Keller made I'm going to say he made us as leaders in his organization years ago study demographics. A guy named Harry Dent did some great research on demographics and spending trends of peak spending years of various generations and the impact it had on the economy. And so a lot of this comes back from that work and research that Gary had us do. So let's go back and let's talk about some other headlines and why people are confused. Will U.S. house prices soar or plunge? These 5 experts are divided. Now somebody's going to see that and they read it. Well, 3 say it's not, 2 say it is. Well, I don't know. It's this again, right? Just shrug the shoulders, don't know. And then at the same time, you have articles like, it's still a seller's market despite mortgage rates hitting 23-year high. And so these are the kind of messages for sellers. And then, go take a look at your local market. And one of the things that we, did is we went and profiled all our various submarkets around San Antonio. San Antonio proper, we peaked in 2022 at 290. We hit January 2023, the decline of 10.3% off peak, and we've recovered to 274. So the person that says, I'm going to wait for things to crash, well, in Central Texas where I live, it's already hit its dip. There's a few segments of the market that are still softer, and yet, that are still softer. And yet here's another thing where I start making the case for the opportunity. Right now, the list to sales price ratio in San Antonio is 94.7. Prior, years, it was 101, 101.2, 101.9. And I want you to remember that for a second, because let's think about a message and a MOFIR around this. Here's another segment of our market. This is more a first-time home buyers market. peaked at 315. It hasn't seen a big decline, 7.6%. Less than 4 months of inventory, and yet it's down, and we're negotiating 93.4% off the original list price. And when I take them through the whole San Antonio MSA, well, November we were at 314 after we had peaked. We then came back to 317. In December, I'm sorry. Yeah, that was December 2022. We still hadn't hit bottom. We hit bottom in 2023 at 305 in January and February. And we've had a natural progression up from 305 to 320. Now, at a $300,000 price, let's say, things have gone up $15,000 since January. If I had applied that $15,000 back in January versus what I'm paying today towards a discount on the mortgage, I could have bought my mortgage at this time down into the fives with combination of seller contribution and maybe what I wanted to contribute. Because when I go back and look at, again, this is my market, I go back and look at San Antonio. If I do an FHA loan that can do a 6% seller's contribution, today at 7.2%, 6% will buy the rate down 1.5%. So that'll take me to 5.875, or let's say 5 3/4. And so my message that I would put out the market, would be, did you know you could still get an interest rate of 5.75%? Now it's going to be conditional on us finding the seller that's willing to make a seller contribution, maybe willing to build some of that in. And yet the stats in my market say that's possible. If you've got any interest in, and then the MOFIRs, you've had any interest in buying a house in the next 12 or 24 months, contact me today to find out why right now might be the best opportunity. Sellers and builders are dealing, at least in my market. And that's where then I can say, and then I say, again, schedule the no obligation strategy session, because we're not going to try to attempt to do this all over the phone with somebody. We've got to get people in with us. And so I go back there, and I'll come back to the chat in a minute. Let me go back to the share, because there's a few things I want to cover before we're done today, and that will pull all this together for you. And let's go. Oops. And so one of the things that we do in our consulting guide is we've mapped this all out for the consumer. And we noticed that, okay, when did the median price peak occur in San Antonio in our MSA? Well, this was the MSA, not San Antonio proper. Well, it was 90 days following low inventory. And despite the market being off here, we've had really a low supply situation. We're up to 3.1, when we hit the bottom. We're at 3.9 months supply right now, and that's 11,000 listings. So here's a message. You've got almost 4 times the choices than you had back during the crazy wackadoo market of February, March, April 2022. 4 times, almost 4 times the choices. How many people didn't have choice, and they were having to go through all this competition? And I can show them this. And then, of course, I go back up to 2019 at the top of this graph that you can't see, where I highlight that when we were in a normal seller's market in 2019, we had 10,700 listings. And so this is not a glut. This is now a normal, and you have the best opportunity today as a consumer. Now, what happens if we wait for interest rates to come down, if they were, or that people just adapt this market and we thin the builder excess inventory? If inventory begins to come down, what's really going to happen to prices? Well, they're going to go up. And list to sales prices ratios are going to go up. We may have less negotiation ability on concessions. And again, you may not have that in your market. I know in parts of Chicago area and Middle Illinois, where I'm about to go out and do bold, still tight inventories, yet they're starting to feel seasonal opportunity. So another message might be, it's buying season to make a deal. Think about traveling on shoulder season, right? If the best time to go someplace, is May through July, well, if I go April or August, that shoulder season, I can usually get a better deal. So if I don't buy when the market is seasonally elevated, as we're now getting into a seasonal market, I can buy in shoulder season. So there might be the best opportunity to buy might be the fourth quarter and get concessions. And so one of the things that I can make the case for too is, the other thing that comes up. So here's the other message is, are we overvalued? And if you look at this graph, and you've got, again, that comes from the Keller Williams research, it says we should be at 357,000 national median price. We're median price in the 380s right now. And by the way, that's only 7%. It's only 7% above the long-term trend line. And you're going, well, man, it feels like the market has gone up so steeply. Well, it has. And yet, following the Great Recession, we stayed below the long-term trend line for over a decade. And then combined with low interest rates, that just heated everything up. Now the demographic trend with millennials coming in their home buying years, and we're just 7% above trend. And if we were to keep a 4% trend, well, we'll be back on trend in 2 years if somebody bought today. And here we just make a case in our San Antonio guide that, well, our median price is 320. The 4% trend line is 357. We're one of the fastest growing metropolitan areas in the country. It's reasonable to say that we're moving towards the long-term trend. And then I bring in this conversation around something called the safe zone. This just gets into timing the market. And this is actually, this is in the shift book. If you want to go read about this in the shift book. And it says, like the stock market, attempting to time the real estate market is nearly impossible. And the question is, where am I? So based upon the graphs I showed for San Antonio, we're past the market peak. We declined 9-10%, depending on segment of the market. And we've already spun back up. And here's the interesting thing. You don't realize the change has occurred until after it's occurred. Now, so we believe our market has clearly come up and hit this point of realization that the market is back on a great track. And even if it were to slide back a little bit, it would be in the trough. And it would be, we call this the lucky zone down here. That's the unlucky zone up here. And yet over time, time takes care of all ills. And right now, there's no question we're clearly in the safe zone. And this is true for so many of your markets, folks. And implementing that conversation specific to your market trends. And when did we hit bottom? Where are we today? Take them through the cycle. And are we in the safe zone? In most of our markets, we are. And even if it retreated a little bit, the cost of waiting and maybe getting caught up in a heated market as inventories thin or competition begins to occur wouldn't be worth the wait. So that being said, understanding these graphs, and you're going to get all these recordings so you can walk through this. And yet with just a few graphs, I'm able to build a message in MOFIRs. Here, combining the interest rate discussion. If right now I can negotiate 95.6% on average, well, maybe I pay full price and I get 5% in concessions, and I buy the interest rate down and add a little bit to that and buy the interest rate down 1.5% from where it is right now, and I've got my rate. And I'm going to be in a really healthy space there. If I wait, this might come back up to 100% as inventories decline, and I may not have that leverage. So back to the question earlier, is there good news? Yeah, the good news is in the rest of the trends, is that you have choices, you have the ability to negotiate, and possibly in some issues, you can still get a 6% or a 5.75% interest rate in the right circumstances. And through all this, I can build a conversation that, by the way, we're in the safe zone, and likely, all trends are that we're liable to see a pronounced advance forward in values. So let's look at this. You might want to screenshot this or grab it later. And just from the few things we looked at, what are some of the possible messages? We said buyers get breathing room, list to sales price ratio. So it's not the bidding war. Sorry, that's sensitive. One of the most stable markets in the US, and I said North Carolina, but that was because I did this for a North Carolina class the other day, sorry. Affordability, new housing options, first-time buyers, assistance programs, less competition, housing shortage, law of supply and demand. Nationally, we still have a housing shortage. And that's going to be an issue probably for a while. And of course, the future of interest rates, what will drive rates is demographics. And all the demographic trends are pointing to more pressure on interest rates. So what I want to leave you with today, we're going to put a couple of things in the chat for you too, I want to invite you to our Never Ending Referrals program. We're kicking off today at noon with our market of the moment updates. You've got a lot of that here today. We're going to go deeper on a couple of points today. And then next week, we start with session 1, and we go through the 8 lessons of how do I build a great relationship-based business. And if you will, we'll put a link for the registration in the chat, or you can go to neverendingreferrals.com and find out all about that. And we're also going to put in the chat, if you're familiar with DTD2, Never Ending Referrals program created the DTD2 system. And how do I put my database on a schedule? And if you haven't learned about that, you can come to our Never Ending Referral sessions, learn more about it. If you've taken Bold, you've been introduced to DTD2. We're going to put those schedules for next year and rest of the year in the chat so that you've got those, so that you can program your calendar to be in touch with your database. And so here's the last thing I'll leave you with on this, and that is this. There are opportunities for the right people in today's market. The ability to negotiate. How many people did we sell houses to that settled because they just needed a house and they didn't get the ideal house? And maybe they've got a really low interest rate, and yet would they get in the market if they could have their rate bought down, if they had the right deal? How many people have massive amounts of equity today that they can apply towards their purchase? And interest rates could go higher still. And so acting today could be a hedge against that, controlling their housing cost. And in periods of inflation, rent's only going to go up. So for a renter, we might have some dips, and yet the overall housing shortage, et cetera, is a factor. Of course, our program's $39 a month. It's a minimum 5-month stay. And so we've got people been with us 2 and 3 years because we come around every quarter and we're looking at all these things. What are these conversations? And our job is to help you navigate every time you do the database 2 or the DTD2 cycle. You've got conversations you can use. So questions, feel free to come off mute if you have a question or a thought or an aha. I'd love to hear what you took away today. Throw it in the chat. Is that the Mike Fleming I see out there?
Yeah.
I love your laugh. I miss you, Mike Fleming.
Just outstanding, sir. Very outstanding. Thank you very much for sharing all that.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here, man. Any questions? Super informative. Thank you very much. You're welcome. Yes, when you register, you gain 24/7 access to our portal. Everything is recorded. You have an on-demand courses for every lesson that we teach. So if you'd like to have that at your disposal, Mike, we've got market center programs for this, where they can facilitate it in their market center as well. So we're here to help, be a resource to help you navigate. We'll be emailing the recording out to you. Thank you, Georgia. Appreciate it. Dawn, awesome. Don't let any of this scare you. It's just a market. You're experiencing more of a normal market than we've had in forever. In terms of interest rates, supply, demand, although our supplies in some of our places are still in the 1 and 2 months in certain parts of the country. Matt, go ahead, man.
Thanks, Steve. That was great. So, even though you said you're pessimistic about the interest rate, but overall, what I got was that it's optimistic about real estate market. So, even though you're saying that interest rate might not come down, but still, it's a good time to buy compared to the future, not compared to the past.
Yeah, the past is the past. It's gone. You got it, Matt. And it's just every market has its opportunities, and it's just this is where Gary said the message that matches the market. I can put a message out that says, "Did you know you can still get an interest rate for 5 7/8?" And call me today and to find out how, and we can dial that in. So there's opportunities, and again, not every market is the same. You've got to find your message related to your market as it is, and what's the opportunity in your market, build a message around it, and then an offer. And today, guys, we used to have this attitude that I'm not working with anybody that's not ready to do something right now. People don't know if they're ready. You have to get to the kitchen table, have a conversation with them, ask them about what it is they want to accomplish, and then educate them. And then let them make an informed, educated decision versus a fear-based decision. Dwight,
Stephen, just before you go, sorry.
Yeah.
I saw that a lot of your information comes from other sources. So that's really nice. You're not putting your opinion in front of their face, but it's more educated and researched material. How did you find this? For example, I saw one of your references was a real estate or center in A&M University.
Mm-hmm. What state are you in, by the way?
Maryland.
So I bet there's some university that has a real estate center that does research on residential real estate. And you just got to go find those aggravators. Where can I find reports, data, all this? Showing Time, if you have Showing Time, has some pretty robust reports. Find out what your options are. Most states have somebody that's doing that work, and you can access it. You want builder information? Let me give you the name Zonda, Zonda. And Zonda puts out, market reports on what's going on in the building industry, by metropolitan area. And you can get some basic reports just going to their site, Zonda, Zonda.
Okay.
And this is where, and here, let me tell you where I get a lot of stuff is Apple News. I subscribe to Apple News, and now, by the way, it knows that I like looking at what? Economic things, real estate things. So my feed gets that, and I save those things, and I'm able to go clip those headlines and read the articles and use them in presentations. So Dwight, go ahead, my friend.
Hey, great job, Steve, today. And just two big ahas for me. One, early on in the broadcast, hear what the clients think first, because we don't know where they're getting their information from, and then either educate or validate. I think that's a great way to start these conversations, because they already got a viewpoint, and if yours is drastically different than theirs, you're not going to win that conversation. But if you could hear theirs first and then validate or educate, that was huge for me. The other one was the 21 years folks would have waited to get back below 8% interest rate.
Yes.
That was huge for me today. So those are my two big takeaways.
That's where these are the conversations we have to dial in. Good job. Thank you, Dwight. Lauren.
Hey, yeah, questions about your program. So the slides like you provided in this, and the trusted advisor, like the smart plan and all that great information, as part of the program, are there additional slides as we go through this that you're going to be providing? These things like that are actually items of value that we can send through command to our database?
Everything we do, you've got recordings of, I'm the market of the moment update I'm doing today, the consulting guide that I shared with y'all, that, they're going to get a download of that. And of course, it's in PowerPoint. You got to make it look like your market, and yet it's just designed to give you, a starting place. What could I communicate? How would it look? Make it look the way you want to look. And yet the biggest challenge is creating that message, right? How do I communicate to the consumer what it is they need to know to be able to decide and have an educated decision? So, okay. Yeah.
Thank you. And then it's for 5 months. So then what happens after the 5 months?
Well, every quarter we begin the quarter with our market of the moment. Here's the latest dialogues to have. Here's what we're seeing in the trends, and then we begin the eight sessions over again every quarter. And like I said, Lauren, we've got people who've been with us 2-3 years because they're working to master this, and you can't master it in one sitting. It's like a buffet, right? It's too much. It's too much. You can only eat a little bit at a time. So we're going to go back and have that, next time and work on that part of my business. And we're constantly updating it, as you can see, based on what's happening in real time.
Okay, thanks so much.
You got it. All right. Well, Vondell, happy to talk to you about that. So, and yeah, if you're not with KW, might not have had access to something. Okay, perfect. All right, guys, thank you for being here today. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
Stephen, do you also cover, you said San Antonio, right?
Yeah, San Antonio,
Oh,
Austin.
Okay. Is it okay if I reach out to you as a referral partner?
Yep. San Antonio. I live in San Antonio. I have market centers in the Austin area, the suburbs, Round Rock, Georgetown, and would love to be connected with you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, gang.
Take care.
Have a good one.
Have a
Thank you. Bye.